Bueno, we were here, yes. Um, what I was saying is the difference between the psychology of Richard and Clarissa, no? How different they are, no? Uh, Richard, if you said something, Teresa, I couldn't hear.
No, no, no.
No. Richard is simple, yes. He he could not tell her he loved her. He held her hand. Happiness is this, he thought. Yes. So for him, that is all. And he also informs Clarissa about his lunch. They had been writing a letter to the Times for Millicent Bratton. That was about all Hugh was fit for. It is evident he doesn't like Hugh.
No.
And our dear Miss Kilman, he asked. Clarissa thought the roses absolutely lovely, first bunched together, now of their own accord starting apart. Kilman arrives just as we've done lunch, she said. Elizabeth turns pink. They shut themselves up. I suppose they are praying. So Clarissa doesn't like Kilman. She is, yes. And you remember that this Kilman, this woman, is trying in a way to convert Elizabeth.
Yes.
And Clarissa, who is an agnostic, is also against this, yes? Lord, he didn't like it. This is Richard. He didn't like it. But these things pass over if you let them. So they also, in this topic, they are different. Clarissa is against the teacher, but she, in a way, acts accordingly. Richard says, okay, these things pass over if you let them. Yeah, so he says, well, this is something that will pass. In a Macintosh with an umbrella, said Clarissa. She detests Kilman. He had not said, I love you, but he held her hand. Happiness is this, he thought. But why should I ask all the dull women in London to my parties? Said Clarissa. And if Mrs. Marsham gave a party, did she invite her guests? Poor Ellie Henderson, said Richard. It was a very odd thing how much Clarissa minded about her parties, he thought. You see, again, another difference. Yes, for him it's okay. Invite Ellie Henderson. But Richard had no notion of the look of a room. However, what was he going to say? What was he going to say? He was going to say, I love you.
Yes.
If she worried about these parties, he would not let her give them. Did she wish she had married Peter? But he must go. So he changes and he says, okay, I must go. He must be off, he said, getting up. But he stood for a moment as if he were about to say something, and she wondered what? Why? There were the roses. Some committee, she asked as he opened the door. Armenians, he said, or perhaps it was Albanians. No idea what the committee was for. And there is a dignity in people, a solitude, even between husband and wife, a gulf. And that one must respect, thought Clarissa. No? So Clarissa thought that there was a gulf between a husband and a wife, and that one must respect this dignity, no? So, for one would not part with it oneself or take it against his will from one's husband without losing one's independence, one's self-respect, something, after all, priceless. So you see how Clarissa finds her independence as her self-respect. For her, that is, her self-respect. And for her, that is priceless. So again, the differences between them. Yes, she accepts this lack of communication, we can say, because for her, that preserves her independence. He returned with a pillow and a quilt, an hour's complete rest after luncheon, he said, and he went. How like him. He would go on saying an hour's complete rest after luncheon to the end of time, because a doctor had ordered it once. It was like him to take what doctor said literally. Yes, this is Clarissa thinking about her husband. Yes.
Yeah.
Part of his adorable, divine simplicity, which no one had to the same extent, which made him go and do the thing while she and Peter frittered their time away bickering. Yes, so Peter and Clarissa are very similar.
Mm.
While Richard is different, he's simple. Yes, and so a doctor told him once that he needed an hour's complete rest after luncheon, and he did it. Yes, he respected it. He was already halfway to the House of Commons, to his Armenians, his Albanians, having settled her on the sofa looking at his roses. And people would say, Clarissa Dalloway is spoiled. Mm? So the idea that she was spoiled, yes, era una malcriada.
Mm.
She cared much more for her roses than for the Armenians. Hunted out of existence, maimed, frozen, the victims of cruelty and injustice. She had heard Richard say so over and over again. No, she could feel nothing for the Albanians, or was it the Armenians? But she loved her roses. Didn't that help the Armenians? The only flowers she could bear to see cut. But Richard was already at the House of Commons, at his committee, having settled all her difficulties. But no, alas, that was not true. He did not see the reasons against asking Ellie Anderson. She would do it, of course, as he wished it. Since he had brought the pillows, so she would lie down, but, why did she suddenly feel, for no reason, that she could discover desperately unhappy? You see, this part of the novel shows clearly this difference. She feels desperately unhappy, although for the rest of the world, she was spoiled. Yes, he brings her the pillow, he tells her to rest, yes, and he goes to work. He goes to the House of Commons. Mm? As a person who has dropped some grain of pearl or diamond into the grass and parts the tall blades very carefully, this way and that, and searches here and there vainly, and at last spies it there at the roots. So she went through one thing and another. No, it was not Sally Seton saying that Richard would never be in the cabinet because he had a second-class brain. It came back to her. No, she did not mind that. Nor was it to do with Elizabeth either and Doris Kilman. Those were the facts. It was a feeling, some unpleasant feeling. So you see how Clarissa thinks and thinks. Richard thinks quickly. He says, okay, my life is a miracle. This is happiness, and that's it. But she looks for the reason of her unhappiness, like somebody who is looking for a pearl or a diamond in the grass. She searches, she inspects. And so she thinks it was because Sally said something negative about Richard. No, no. It was because she doesn't like Doris Kilman. No. It was a feeling, some unpleasant feeling. Now, this metaphor, yes, of somebody looking for a diamond in the grass is connected to Jung. Yes, you know this idea that Jung had of our mind. He compared it with the woods. Yes, dark and full of trees where you cannot see properly. Yes, with some lights coming in and giving us information. And of course, Jung was something or somebody that Virginia Woolf read. Yes.
Yeah.
So this idea of our mind being like the wood or like the grass full of blades, and you cannot see. You have to go deep and search for the truth. So she wants to know why she is unhappy. A feeling, some unpleasant feeling earlier in the day, perhaps, something that Peter had said, combined with some depression of her own, in her bedroom, taking off her hat, and what Richard had said had added to it. But what had he said? There were his roses. Her parties, that was it, her parties. Both of them criticized her very unfairly. Who are both here? Peter and Richard. Laughed at her very unjustly for her parties. That was it. That was it. So now she understood why she felt unhappy, because Peter and Richard criticized her for her parties. Mm. In fact, they because she felt that they thought she was superficial. That was what made her feel unhappy. Well, how was she going to defend herself? Now that she knew what it was, she felt perfectly happy. They thought, or Peter at any rate thought, that she enjoyed imposing herself, liked to have famous people about her, great names, was simply a snob in short. Well, Peter might think so. Richard merely thought it foolish of her to like excitement when she knew it was bad for her heart. It was childish, he thought, and both were quite wrong. What she liked was simply life. So, well, you see how Clarissa has a very um, deep mind. Yes, she wants to know, she wants to analyze. Although she felt unhappy because her husband thought she was childish, and Peter thought she was a snob.
Mm.
Okay, that's what I do it for, she said, speaking aloud to life. What she liked was life, no? Since she was lying on the sofa, cloistered, exempt, the presence of this thing which she felt to be so obvious became physically existent. Well, I think I sent you, no, yes, I sent you on Monday some analysis connected with this idea that the modernists had of the connection between mind and body, how what you thought or what you felt was also shown in your body. Yes. So this is why she says here that what she felt was physically existent. She felt it in her body. Mm? With ropes of sound from the street, sunny with hot breath, whispering, blowing out the blinds. But suppose Peter said to her, yes, yes, but your parties, what's the sense of your parties? All she could say was, and nobody could be expected to understand, they are an offering. You see, for her, her parties were an offering, yes, una ofrenda in that sense, which sounded horribly vague. But who was Peter to make out that life was all plain sailing? Peter, always in love with the wrong woman. What's
Mm.
your love? She might say to him. And she knew his answer. How it is the most important thing in the world, and no woman possibly understood it. Very well, but could any man understand what she meant either about life? She could not imagine Peter or Richard taking the trouble to give a party for no reason whatever. Yes, uh, it is very interesting, no? This idea. She knew that nobody understood her. I mean, her experience, because and in a way, Peter doesn't understand her, and there is a question of genre here, no? Of he says No woman possibly understood that the most important thing in the world is love. And she says, could any man understand what she meant? So also a question of different genres, no? But to go deeper, beneath what people said, in her own mind now, what did it mean to her, this thing she called life? You see how, yes, Malena.
Yes. I wanted to know if her sadness, her disappointment
Yes,
is related to the fact that the people doesn't agree with her, but not for the party itself. Her views for living the present.
yes, yes. I mean, she feels that what she can do for the world, yes, for life, as she said, to celebrate life, was to give parties. This was her way to celebrate life. She said to give a party for no reason whatever, only, I mean, to celebrate life. For her, that was an offering, her way of giving something to the people, to the world. But at the same time, she knew that nobody understood her, especially Peter or Richard. Yes.
Richard.
So that was why she felt unhappy. But now she understood it, and so for her it is clear. Yes. Uh, so to go deeper beneath what people said, in her own mind now, what did it mean to her, this thing she called life? So she wanted to give a party for life. But what was life? Oh, it was very queer. So when I say that they showed, Virginia Woolf is showing the two different ways of thinking, she's also showing the different ways of thinking men and women have. She's showing a Richard who is simple, yes, and who accepts life and celebrates his happiness, but could not speak. He could not tell her, I love you. He only, I mean, he showed it by giving her the flowers. But the way in which a woman goes deep and deeper and deeper because she wants to understand. It's a different way of thinking. And in a way, it is true. Yes.
Yes.
We are more complex, I would say, perhaps. Yes. So, what is life? Oh, it was very queer. Here was so and so in South Kensington, someone up in Bayswater, and somebody else, say, in Mayfair. And she felt quite continuously a sense of their existence. And she felt what a waste. And she felt what a pity. And she felt if only they could be brought together. So she did it. And it was an offering to combine, to create. But to whom? So for her, yes, life was bringing people together.
Mm.
Yes, that was what gave a sense to life. Mm? An offering for the sake of offering, perhaps. Anyhow, it was her gift. Nothing else had she of the slightest importance. Could not think, write, even play the piano. She muddled Armenians and Turks. Muddled, se los mezclaba, ¿sí? Para ella eran iguales. Loved success, hated discomfort, must be liked. Talked oceans of nonsense. And to this day, asked her what the equator was, and she did not know. All the same, that one day should follow another. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That one should wake up in the morning, see the sky, walk in the park, meet Hugh Whitbread. Then suddenly in came Peter. Then these roses, it was enough. after that, how unbelievable death was, that it must end, and no one in the whole world would know how she had loved it all, how every instant. And this is connected to what I think Malena said before, how she loved to live the instant, to live the present. It was Malena, no? You said that.
Yes.
She said, okay, this is life for her, the present, the moment, every instant, yes? And this question of death that appears here, no? How unbelievable death was. What is unbelievable is that this life must end, and that nobody in the world would know that she had loved it. So she could not communicate this, but she enjoyed life like this. The door opened. Elizabeth knew that her mother was resting. She came in very quietly. She stood perfectly still. Uh, then, for the Dalloways in general, we are fair-haired, blue-eyed. Elizabeth, on the contrary, was dark, had Chinese eyes in a pale face, an oriental mystery, was gentle, considerate, still. As a child, she had had a perfect sense of humor. But now, at 17, why, Clarissa could not in the least understand. She had become very serious, like a hyacinth seed in glossy green, with buds just tinted, a hyacinth which has had no sun. So, well, Clarissa cannot understand, but this is normal. Uh, Children might be very happy and have a sense of humor, and then they become adolescents and they change and
Yes.
they become ill-humored. So this is normal. But Clarissa cannot understand why her daughter had changed. She stood quite still and looked at her mother, but the door was ajar, and outside the door was Miss Kilman, as Clarissa knew. Miss Kilman in her mackintosh, listening to whatever they said. So you see how Clarissa resented Doris Kilman. She hates her. Yes, Miss Kilman stood on the landing and wore a mackintosh. This idea that the mackintosh all the time, yes?
Yes. What Macintosh is?
Es un piloto.
Piloto.
Pero la mujer esta usaba piloto todo el tiempo y un piloto feo, viejo, porque era pobre, porque no era agradable. Y era un día de sol, pero se ponía el piloto igual. Clarissa no se la aguanta. Ah, yes, Miss Kilman stood on the landing and wore a mackintosh, but had her reasons, claro. First, it was cheap. Second, she was over 40. I did not, after all, dress to please. She was poor, moreover, degradingly poor. Otherwise, she would not be taking jobs from people like the Dalloways, from rich people who like to be kind. Look at, this is the mind of Kilman, eh? Look how she thinks. She would not be taking jobs from people like the Dalloways, from rich people who like to be kind. Mr. Dalloway, to do him justice, had been kind, but Mrs. Dalloway had not. She had been merely condescending. She came from the most worthless of all classes, the rich with a smattering of culture. You see how Doris Kilman despises Clarissa, because she says that she is a member of the most worthless of all classes. The rich, but with a smattering of culture, so only a little culture, rich but with no culture. They had expensive things everywhere, pictures, carpets, lots of servants. She considered that she had a perfect right to anything that the Dalloways did for her. So this is what Doris Kilman thought, that she had a right to all the things that the Dalloways could give her, because they had an excess of things. She had been cheated. I mean, this woman who we don't like either, because when we read it, we dislike her, has this resentment against other people because she thinks that she had been cheated because she's ugly, she doesn't have money, etc. No? Yes, the word was no exaggeration, for surely a girl has a right to some kind of happiness, and she had never been happy. What with being so clumsy and so poor? And then, just as she might have had a chance at Miss Dolby's school, the war came. And she had never been able to tell lies. Miss Dolby thought she would be happier with people who shared her views about the Germans. She had had to go. It was true that the family was of German origin, spelt the name Killman in the 18th century. But her brother had been killed. They turned her out because she would not pretend that the Germans were all villains. So you see what had happened. Doris had got a job at a school, and that was good for her. But then the war came. And of course, during the war, the British were against the Germans. And apparently, this Killman could not say that all the Germans were bad. And her surname is German. So that's why they turned her out. They dismissed her. She lost her job. When she had German friends, when the only happy days of her life had been spent in Germany. And after all, she could read history. She had had to take whatever she could get. So she was a history teacher, but not like Malena. Malena is not like this. Mr.
A Sherman.
Dalloway, ¿cómo, Malena?
I'm not a Sherman.
You are not a German lover. You're not a German lover. Mr. Dalloway had come across her working for the Friends. He had allowed her, and that was really generous of him, to teach his daughter history. Also, she did a little extension lecturing and so on. Then our Lord had come to her, and here she always bowed her head. She had seen the light 2 years and 3 months ago. Now she did not envy women like Clarissa Dalloway. She pitied them. So, poor Killman, no? She was poor. She was ugly. She was alone. She lost her job. She was against all these rich people. But she found God. And the expression, she had seen the light 2 years and 3 months ago. She had had this epiphany. And so after that, she didn't envy people like Clarissa. She pitied them, which is worse, which is worse. It is better to pity people and not to envy people than to pity them, because she feels superior. She pitied and despised them from the bottom of her heart. As she stood on the soft carpet looking at the old engraving of a little girl with a muff. With all this luxury going on, what hope was there for a better state of things? Instead of lying on a sofa, my mother is resting, Elizabeth had said, she should have been in a factory, behind the counter, Mrs. Dalloway and all the other fine ladies. So you see how she hated them.
Yes.
She resents them, yes? Bitter and burning, Miss Killman had turned into a church 2 years, 3 months ago. She had heard the Reverend Edward Whittaker preach. The boys had seen the solemn lights descend, and whether it was the music or the voices, the hot and turbulent feelings which boiled and surged in her had been assuaged as she sat there, and she had wept copiously. and gone to call on Mr. Whittaker at his private house in Kensington. It was the hand of God, he said. The Lord had shown her the way. So now, whenever the hot and painful feelings boiled within her, this hatred of Mrs. Dalloway, this grudge against the world, she thought of God. She thought of Mr. Whittaker. Rage was succeeded by calm. A sweet savor filled her veins. Her lips parted, and standing formidable upon the landing in her mackintosh, she looked with steady and sinister serenity at Mrs. Dalloway, who came out with her daughter. You see, so she prays not to kill Mrs. Dalloway, and so she looks at her, but with a sinister serenity. How awful.
Yes.
Awful. Elizabeth said she had forgotten her gloves. That was because Miss Kilman and her mother hated each other. She could not bear to see them together. She ran upstairs to find her gloves. But Miss Kilman did not hate Mrs. Dalloway. Claro, this is what she wants to think, but she really hates her. Turning her large gooseberry-colored eyes upon Clarissa, observing her small pink